just like we should. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
All right, brother. Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. You're such a remarkable young man. And I'm thinking, what the heck have I got a 5-piece band for? I could have you, you know? If you could just work in the piano and with one of those extra hands you got, that would be great. No, I love my band. I'm kidding you. Don't you? Do you love our new band? Okay. Got to have a little fun, right? So, and I wanted to lighten things up because now I want to talk about death and suffering and pain. So, you know, we had our moment. And no, you know, it's an interesting thing because one can be left with the impression when studying science of mind, when studying the works of Ernest Holmes and metaphysics in general, that we are to live happy, peppy lives all of the time. Right? And that if somehow we're not, we're doing something wrong. We explore our consciousness, or perhaps we explore other people's consciousness to help them understand what's wrong with them. But you see, life is full. This is why I always make a point at the beginning of our services to talk about, we celebrate the fullness of our life. When I came into these teachings 30 years ago, there was very much, I remember talking to people, and sometimes they'd say, I haven't seen you in a while. They say, well, I haven't been to church. I've been sick. Like as if there was something was off, I couldn't go because I wasn't demonstrating perfectly. And I'm happy that we're evolving beyond that to understand that our life is full of all of this. Now, here's what I know. Each one of us is a divine being. Each one of us at the essence and the core of who we are spiritual in nature. And what that means is that by our very nature, nothing we had to earn, nothing we had to gain, nothing we had to overcome, but by our very nature, we are whole, perfect, complete spiritual beings. That's the essence of who we are. Feels good, doesn't it? Like, look at me, all whole and perfect and spiritual in nature. Now, what I also know is that we don't all express that perfectly all the time. And so we are always in a process of growth, of evolution, of unfoldment. I believe that this journey is meant to be one of exploration. And so I've been in a weird place. So I just want to let you know that right up front in case you hadn't already figured it out. Because one of the things that I had this realization is that as I look at our center and our organization and where we are and what we're doing and what's happening at the world of effects and how sometimes there's not enough money to meet the outgo and all these other things, it's really a dynamic exploration for me personally. And I had this realization not too long ago that we as a spiritual center are doing better than we ever have at what we've always done. Do you ever have that feeling? Like everything, I'm doing it right. Man, I've got the affirmations, I've got the prayer work, I've got the meditation, I am tithing, I've got my spiritual life together, and yet somehow my life may not reflect the glory of God. What the heck? What the heck, right? So in that realization, I had this idea that maybe, even though we're doing what we've always done better than we've ever done it before, maybe in a different world, we need to look at it differently. For me, it's like, you know what? I can dial my rotary phone faster than I've ever been able to dial it. Yes. Right? But nobody uses a rotary phone anymore. And so it's fascinating to me to look at that. So I've been looking at our center. This is just my little, because the center is my personal exploration. I realize other people have lives, and this is just part of your lives. But this is, this is my life. And so I spend an inordinate amount of time either being here or thinking about being here and what that means and how to serve better and how to reach out to the world. Because here's another interesting realization that I had. That in looking at some of our statistics on our webs and that sort of thing, that we have almost as many people attend service online as in person. Isn't that cool? So everybody wave. Hi. So glad you're here. Little oral hug to those people that are watching this later. So that's a cool thing because it turns out there's this thing called the internet and people use it. So it's changing some of the dynamics of what we're doing. So in my moments of angst and whatever, I think, oh my God, what if it all just falls apart? Because that's really a great question. I learned this a long time ago, actually in a Dale Carnegie course. And it was talking about worrying. And they said, imagine what's the very worst thing that could happen? And could you deal with it? Could you handle it? And if you can handle it, then get on with your life, right? Sometimes we do that. We worry and we think, oh, what if... So for me, I kind of got this place where, what if the worst happened? We just had to close it all down, shut it down. Could we survive? Yes, of course we could. But then it got me to thinking, well, then what would happen? Because you know what? So many of the things that we do in a church setting have been done for 2,000 years. Now, things have changed over the last 2,000 years. I don't know if you've noticed. Some of you have been around for part of a big chunk of that, and as have I. And, some things have changed. And so, so in that is the freedom, right? So when our lives reach that point where what we know to do is no longer working, it creates a new opportunity. Not to do the old better and faster and more, but perhaps to take a new approach to our living. So here's what I've discovered. This thing called pain serves an amazing purpose for us. It serves a purpose. It concerns me that one of the great problems of our world today, of our culture, is we have a lot of people highly addicted to some form of painkiller. It's an epidemic. Because we want to avoid the pain at all costs. What if pain is serving us? I believe it is. Now, I'm not inviting us to an indulgence of this, but to recognize that pain is a gift of the divine. That it's a very dangerous thing to not have some kind of pain mechanism going on. If you didn't experience pain, you could set your hand on the stove and never realize it. Not good. But when we realize, aha, ow, that hurt. So when we start to experience pain, it's saying something's wrong, something's off, something's amiss. Now we have a choice either into exploration or avoidance. Sometimes when we go into avoidance, turns out the pain really never goes away. We can dull it for a while, we can hide from it for a while, but eventually it comes back bigger, stronger, and better than ever. If we have any 12-step people in the room, they will share with you that how they got to that lowest point was avoiding until it could no longer be avoided. Doesn't matter the particular addiction. We've all done it, right? We've all been there. So Khalil Gibran, who, as you know, is one of my many gurus, speaks to this in the lovely book, The Prophet. And a woman spoke saying, "Tell us of pain." And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." That's worth the price of admission right there. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as some even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. Your pain is the breaking of your current understanding. Life is saying to us, something's not working. Something is off. And so I always like to look at the difference between our pain and our suffering. Because, as someone brilliantly said at one time, your pain is inevitable. If you're alive, you're going to experience pain. If nothing more, that at some point you're going to stub your toe. So your pain is inevitable, but your suffering is optional. You see, the Buddha taught us, and the essence of Buddhism is that all of our suffering comes to us as a result of our attachment or our resistance. We're either trying to hold on to what is, or we're trying to fight what is. And that is the source of our suffering. So it's a wonderful thing to learn how to be in communion, if you will, with the discomfort without resistance to it, and yet allowing something then to be born anew. When we look at our lives and we feel as if it is falling apart, then very often that is the place where newness can be born, where something magnificent can emerge, where a new, more powerful experience of life can happen for us. So for me, I've been looking at this sort of in a grand cosmic way in terms of our center, and saying, wow, what if what is happening here is not it dying, but if it's trying to rebirth. And when I move into that place, then potentiality begins to emerge. So that's why I said, I've been doing this work for about 30 years. I know, hard to believe. I look so darn young, but it's true. No, doesn't look so young. Right? I started many moons ago and spent about 5 years getting ready to go to become a minister, and became a licensed minister, and this is now my 25th year of active licensed ministry. I know, hello. In that time, I have not done permanent damage to myself or anyone else that I'm aware of, and so I'm proud of that. At least not outwardly, sometimes in my mind, But, right? And so I think about what I've experienced in those many years of service. And most of what I've experienced is my own growth and evolution. I often say that every talk I give is just a conversation with myself. I'm just kind enough to let you listen in. Because I realize there's only one person I'm talking to. That God said, this guy, in order for him to ever get it, is going to have to speak about this on a regular, probably weekly, twice a week basis, So thank you for that. And I appreciate you showing up for me to have that exploration. But I've also had so many amazing, sweet, tender moments. You see, one of the great privileges of being a minister is that you get to stand with a couple when they are professing their love for one another and their commitment to spend a life together. him, her, and you, or him, and you, and her. I mean, it's all different now. Back in the old days, it was a him and her, but not anymore. Everybody gets to marry. It's cool, as it should be. But it's a beautiful experience to stand in that space. It's a beautiful experience to bless a baby who's new to the world and have the family come together and set a blessing and an intention for that child's life and how we will serve that child. It's a beautiful experience to stand or sit bedside with someone as you help midwife them from this experience of life into the next. And that's how I look at it. That it is not a death per se, but it is a birth into a different experience of the eternal life. It's an amazingly profound experience to stand in the midst of a community grieving and provide words of hope and inspiration and insight. And so as I look back at my life in ministry, what I see is there was not a good point called wedding and a bad point called funeral. There was beautiful moments, some that were in pain and some that were in joy. But every one of them is a blessing. You see, I think as we become more spiritually aware and more in the oneness of life, we move through evolutions of thought. When I came into this teaching, we were still very much in the, what shall we say, manifestation mode. It was all about demonstration. Kind of the prosperity idea. And that if you were doing it correctly, women, you would wear silk dresses and drive BMWs. Right? That it was, because, why? Because consciousness takes form. And so if you have good consciousness, you get good stuff. Now, I'm happy to say that I think we're evolving beyond that. I think what we're understanding is that there are levels of spiritual growth and awareness. You see, it's a very necessary thing, and much of what Ernest Holmes is teaching in the science of mind, in our text, is this second level of consciousness. This level that says you are not at the effect of life. Life is not happening to you, not a God out there that is punishing some and rewarding others, that likes one group but not the other, that roots for one team or not the other, or decides who wins the lottery. By the way, did anybody win the lottery? No. Nobody won the lottery. Okay. Well, you get to be a billionaire. Yay. All right. We do want to talk about tithing for a moment before this is all over, in case anybody has that winning ticket. Right? So to pray to God, to say, God, let me win the lottery. How many prayers do you think God's getting right now? Oh, I've got to imagine they're like on complete overload right now. But rather, to move into a consciousness of that we have to move. Let me back up for a minute. So the stages of consciousness, the first level is what we often call the victim consciousness, which means life happens to us, right? That's where I came from. I believed in a God that rewarded some and punished others based on certain criteria. Unfortunately, I didn't fit all of the criteria. Ugh, so annoying. I then came into the understanding, and I realized that we're working with a divine, not a personality, not God as personality, but a divine principle. That there's a universal intelligence that is working according to its own nature and is available to all. And so it works according to our own consciousness. In other words, we're co-creative beings with the One. That the infinite potential moves through us and through our consciousness to manifest itself into the world according to our belief. Wow, that'll change your day. That'll make you think twice about your morning declaration. When you jump out of bed and you say, oh, it's going to be one of those days. The universe says, coming right up. I'm on it. Likewise, if you jump out of bed and you put your feet on the floor and say, it's going to be one of those days, the universe says, cool, I'm on it. That's the wonderful thing, isn't it? That the universe, the spiritual principle, is impersonal. It plays no favorites. Now, the benefit of being a victim is you get to blame others. Yes. Doesn't change your life. Will never change your life, but sometimes it can make you feel good. Don't know if you noticed there's a presidential election going on. A certain amount of blame going on. That if they would just be different, everything would be different. But what spiritual teaching tells us is if I will be different, everything will be different. So then we move through that, and it's a powerful phase. I don't diminish it. It's important for us to understand that the way what we believe and our consciousness and our thoughts and our feelings lead to our action, which creates our experience. It's important to understand that. But having understood that, we can move to a higher level of understanding where we begin to realize that the very nature of the divine is always seeking to have its highest self-expression, and that it moves through each one of us knowing our higher good. In other words, my friends, you'll like this, you can let go of running the universe. That's a relief, right? We can simply open to our greater good. So we've been having this conversation. It's interesting, as our organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, is having this conversation. We're having this collective theme we're all doing called A World That Works for Everyone. And since it's just us here in the room, I struggle with our overall way of being. I struggle with everything, in case you haven't figured it. Right? Because one of the things that I sense and I feel is that so much of what we teach is not to how to create a world that works for everyone, but how to make a world that works for me. Right? And so what I know is as long as we stay bound in that second level of consciousness of how do I create the life I want, we don't get to evolve into the higher state of consciousness, which really is not about how do I get what I want, but how do I participate in creating the world that works for everyone. And the world that works for everyone implies and involves a life of service. A life willing to have everyone experience the same good that I have. To have everyone experience the same joy that I experience. To have everyone on this planet know their inherent divinity and worth and wonder. And to me, that's a much more exciting vision. I remember struggling with this early on in thinking, well, is this really, does it really work for everybody in the world, every single person to have a Cadillac? I mean, is that the answer? Or is it something higher? Now, what I know is that we live in an abundant universe. I know that we live on a planet that is amazingly rich and fertile. And I also know that our screwed up thinking collectively is preventing us from the full experience of our glory. So it is not about changing the planet, it is about changing the consciousness of the planet. And therefore, we have some work to keep doing, right? So we get to do our little part. Ernest Holmes said to us this. He said that the world is beginning to realize that it has learned all that it should through suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes a person to be sick, to suffer pain, to be unhappy, and end in oblivion. You see, what he's saying is not that there will not be pain and suffering, but it is not necessary for our growth and unfoldment. Now, here's an experience that I have had from time to time. I'm experiencing some degree of discomfort. Maybe it's pre-pain. Maybe it's full-blown pain. I don't know. Emotionally, physically, whatever. And I go into my sacred space of prayer and contemplation, and I ask the divine, what should I do? And the divine gives me guidance. And I say, well, I don't want to do that. No, I was looking for the easy answer. Okay, let me rephrase that. How could they be different to make my life be better? Right? That's the prayer I want to have. So obviously the answer doesn't come, and I continue down the road until then it becomes a crisis. It's really falling apart. A whack upside the head. And I go, oh, now that the crisis is here, maybe I really need to pay attention. I go into that sacred, secret place of the Most High, and I ask the divine, what should I do? And I get the same darn guidance that I got initially. But now I'm willing to listen. Because now the pain or the discomfort has become greater than the discomfort of being willing to change. So I made a declaration a number of years ago that I would start listening to the still small voice while it was still and small. Right? I mean, we got there eventually, so why not just cut out that 3 years of angst? So we do not have to suffer to grow. We do not have to experience pain to have a different experience. But if we are experiencing pain, so first of all, if we're suffering, let us be looking at what am I resistant to or what am I attached to? Sometimes my pain comes from because I want other people to stay the way they were. I do. I'm just being honest with you. Sorry to, right? I don't want them to grow and change and evolve. What if they left me? I'm not going to go down that road. Right? Or sometimes my pain and discomfort comes because I wish they were different. You really can't win either way, right? It's until we learn to love what is, to love them where they are, to bless them on their journey, even as we do so for ourselves, that we find liberation. So when we can release suffering, then if we're experiencing pain, we can just simply ask it, what is it here for? What is it guiding me to? What is it allowing me to understanding? What part of my understanding needs to be broken open so that I can experience my greater reality? I believe that we are being called as individuals and as community to live from a higher state of being. Yes, we need to understand that we can demonstrate, and we encourage you to demonstrate. We encourage you to have a rich, full, and abundant life. But I think we're also being called to a higher life of service, to a greater presence of the divine, to being the place through which the divine is realized. And so in this willingness to look at what if it all falls apart, I'm willing to see how it might all really be falling together. That something new is emerging, something new is trying to happen. And it's trying to happen through me. And I think it's trying to happen through you. I think you feel it. I think every one of us in this room knows that something is going on. We are living in a time of dynamic change. And at one level it looks ugly and scary and ugh. And yet at the other level, that's part of the old trying to fall away so that this new something can emerge. And every one of us is at choice of where we will play. Will we be the presence of love in the world? Will we be the presence of forgiveness? Will we be the presence of compassion? Or will we allow our ego to engage in enemy thinking? You see, That first level of consciousness always loves to have an enemy. It's what they call the devil, right? The enemy. I don't know. I think we're all a choice. But so what I find is that it's a very exciting and wonderful time. And what I find is that I feel blessed. As I look back at the first 25 years of my ministry, I'm beginning to think I'm learning something. Another 25 years and I'm going to have this thing down. I mean, I'm going to be rocking this thing. But I see the beauty, the tenderness, the moments, neither good nor bad, whether it was life or death, but the beauty of life unfolding as we're willing to be that open vessel through which the divine can make itself known. I invite you to join me on this journey. As our practitioners are coming forward to hold that consciousness with me, I simply want to invite you into this spiritual intention with me. So taking a deep breath, remembering the truth of who we are, remembering that we are indeed one with the only life that there is, the one life, the one power, the one infinite being, that whatever name we give it, it is simply life itself. And because there is but one, all things exist within it. We open our hearts in this moment to experience the fullness of unconditional love. We open our minds to experience divine wisdom. In this holy and sacred space, we allow ourselves to remember the truth of who we are. Holy, sacred, spiritual beings. And as we do so, we call forth the highest that is within us. We call forth divine wisdom, perfect love, great compassion and understanding. We speak the word of truth this day, for we are utilizing an intelligence through the word and the consciousness that we hold. As I speak this word of truth, I'm simply recognizing wholeness is the only true reality. I know that that wholeness reveals itself as health, as well-being, as vitality, moving through every cell and every system to bring forth its perfect complement. We speak the word of truth as we know right here and right now that indeed love is the only reality. There is nothing against love. There is simply the lack sometimes of love. So we choose to be the place through which love is made known. We choose to unconditionally love ourselves and extend that same love and compassion to all that we meet. We find it easy to forgive and to release that which no longer serves. We find it easy to extend compassion to everyone, everywhere. We know that we are abundant beings right now because we live in an abundant universe. We are one with the source and the substance of all that is. And so we create gateways of new understanding through which this creative power can realize itself. I am grateful to stand in the awareness of the presence of the divine, to open my heart to infinite love. I am grateful for the many blessings in my life, as each of us are. And so we give thanks for this spiritual community, for this divine idea that is unfolding in new and powerful ways, shining light into the world, being a loving, healing presence. We take this moment to recognize the inherent truth that every man, woman, and child is one with this divine presence. And so we extend a blessing to our brothers and sisters across the planet. We are indeed holding that high vision for a world that works for all, for a planet at peace, for an emergent new reality. How good it is to bear witness to this unfolding idea. And we take a moment, as we always do, to bless all priests, all rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith and all faith traditions. For we know at the heart is the divine, and we celebrate the many pathways to greater spiritual understanding and practice. I invite you in this moment to simply place your hand over your heart, to recognize that divine intelligence that is beating itself through your heart, coursing through your veins, animating your blood, that is the very same intelligence of the entire universe, and it is simply seeking to make itself known. So we release any burden, we forgive ourselves freely, we choose love, and we say yes to this divine power which is always saying yes to us. Let us be healed, let us be whole, let us experience our inherent holiness. For all of these blessings and so many more, I'm simply giving thanks. I'm releasing this word into that divine law, knowing that it is calling forth the highest good for all concerned, always in perfect timing, always in divine right order. And so in profound joy and gratitude, I simply give thanks. I release this word. I know that it is so, as together we say, and so it is.